This one's funny, and there's also some good news in it as well. I remember when I was a teacher, it was always really important to have patience, particularly with students that didn't do any work outside of the classroom and they would misuse terms or get them confused. So last week, at the end of last week, there's this guy called Jeremy Hunt. He's the Chancellor of the Exchequer in Britain. So basically, he's the finance minister. He's in charge of setting taxation and government spending in the whole of the UK. So quite an important position to be in. And you would hope, wouldn't you, that the politician who's put in charge of that would know something about economics. So anyway, last week, Jeremy's giving this presentation, this speech. And he's repeating himself. He's talking about things he talked about a couple of weeks back, that there's record numbers of people of my age who've sacked off work and took early retirement. I reckon a big cause of that is just the social contract being broken, which I've talked about before. He's also talking about how, as a result of this, there's labour shortages. And because of a shortage of labour, firms will find it difficult to grow. So, in terms of basic economics, I suppose, if you are short of labour, that will restrict a firm's ability to produce stuff. However, though, what we were told by these people at the World Economic Forum, and remember, Jez is one of those, he's got his own page there, is that the AI is going to do all the work. So, surely it shouldn't be a problem if people are dropping out of the labour force, because the AI is going to be taking their work anyway. Isn't that what they've been telling us is going to happen? So why is Jeremy getting all vexed about something that he says he was expecting anyway? And why is it such a big problem if the AI is so wonderful? My feeling on this is that the AI probably isn't so wonderful. So in his speech, he then goes on to explain that since DIVC 91, there's been a 70% increase in the number of people claiming disability benefits. So that's quite a lot, isn't it? A 70% increase in the space of 2-3 years is a lot. And we can only speculate about why that might be the case, while there's all of a sudden there's a 70% increase in the number of people who are unfit to work. I'm sure it's got nothing to do with the Britney Spears and the boosters, and we're not allowed to talk about that anyway, are we? He then fesses up to the fact that in Britain, a fifth of the workforce are economically inactive. Now, what that means is that a fifth of the number of people who are of working age are not in work. They're choosing not to work. They're not unemployed. You've got to add the unemployed onto that. But the scale of the figures is huge. Our workforce is about 25 million people. So a fifth of that is 5 million. So there are 5 million people in Britain of working age who are choosing not to work. And then on top of that, I looked at this just now. In Britain, unemployment on top of that is 1.24 million. So if you add those two figures up together, there's about 6.5 million people in Britain of working age who are not working. So this is actually a huge issue. Labour is being massively underutilised in Britain, and it's a problem because even Jeremy Hunt is talking about it. So again, it's casting doubts on this AI story, isn't it? That the AI is going to be taking over people's jobs. If that was the case, Jeremy wouldn't be worried, but he is. So that shows me that the AI isn't all it's cracked up to be. So later on in his speech, he drops this absolute huge clanger, a schoolboy error that, I would have struggled to contain myself if one of my A-level economics students had made an error of this. Let's call it what it is: stupidity, ignorance. So what is it? Here, I'll read out what he said, word for word. So he said, This is Jeremy Hunt. We will never harness the full potential of our country unless we unlock it for each and every one of our citizens. Nor will we fix our productivity puzzle unless everyone who can participate does, he said. Now, for me, what this indicates is he's clueless. He's confusing two very basic terms in economics, and those terms are production and productivity. So production is just total output. So across the whole economy, that's measured by this figure called GDP. Productivity sounds like production, but it's completely different. It's a measure of efficiency. And what productivity measures is output per worker. Yeah? So, you know, I would imagine most of the people listening to this channel are kind of switched on people. So if you wanted to work out productivity, what you would do is divide total output by the workforce, the number of people that you've got working to produce that output. So let's take an example, a factory that maybe produces widgets, yeah? So let's call it Widget PLC. And they produce 200 widgets, and the firm employs 50 workers. So if you divide 200 by 50, you get 4. So each worker produces 4 widgets. So 4 widgets per worker, and that's the productivity. So if you now want to think about measuring productivity across the whole economy, look at a figure called GDP, Gross Domestic Product. That's the total value of all goods and services produced within an economy in a year. And you would divide that figure by total employment. So the number of people in Britain who are actually working. So, I don't know, total employment, we'll put that. Yeah, and that's how you would work out productivity across a country such as in Britain. So if you do what Hunt says, which is to get more people back into employment, this figure on the bottom line will increase. Total employment will go up. So will GDP. So we know that production will go up, but we don't know what will happen to this figure because it all depends on whether this figure increases by more or less than this figure has increased. We have no idea. So for Hunt to say that productivity will rise if we increase employment is completely wrong. What he's doing is confusing production with productivity. If we get more people working, production will rise, but productivity per worker might not. It all depends on the productivity of the people that you've tempted back into the workforce. You know, is their productivity higher or lower than the people that were working before you tempted them back into the workforce? Another issue where the difference between production and productivity matters is with immigration. So if you bring people into the country and those people find work, employment levels will go up. So will production, but we don't know what impact the increase in immigration will have on productivity because we don't know what the average output per worker is of the people that we're importing into the country. And this matters because productivity affects our living standards. Where I am now in Finland, there's a lot of technology, the education system is very good, and Finns themselves are smart, they're smart people. And this will sound controversial, but you know, if you live in a country where it's -20 in the winter time, when things are rough. You have to be a tough cookie. You have to be smart and intelligent to survive in those conditions. So over time, you know, if you low IQ people, they're out of the gene pool. In countries like this, you have to be smart. You know, if you eat your seed potatoes because you're hungry in February, that's you finished. So those people, they don't pass on their genes. It's the smartest that survive. So in countries like this that have got very high levels of productivity, each worker produces lots of output. And because they produce lots of output, it means that each consumer is able to consume a lot of stuff and have a high material living standard. Or the other thing you notice here is that they have a very high living standard without having to work as many hours. Why is that? Well, each worker can produce more per hour, so they don't need to work as long as we do, or as long as people do in other countries that have got low productivity. So all of this really matters. And for Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, to not know the difference, or to just publicly confuse production with productivity, you know, saying that if we get more people back into work, that will increase productivity. That's laughable. And it's quite, well, it's very, very shocking that a person in that job is so clueless about something so basic as the difference between production and productivity. So three conclusions about all of this. The first one is, be wary of these people. I used to work with loads of them, and they would tell kids that the answer to all your problems is just to make government bigger. They're more intelligent than you, they're experts, and what you should do is to give them more of your money via taxes, and then they can provide you with things that they think that you want. And because they're smarter than you, it will be a better situation than it would be if you were spending your own money on your behalf. You know, it's almost like the government's your parents. They're smarter than you, so defer to them. What this shows me, well, I already knew it anyway, but, you know, it's just actually quite shocking that you've in Britain, you've got the Chancellor of the Exchequer who doesn't know the difference between production and productivity. Yeah, and this isn't a slip of the tongue, you know, because if you make a mistake of this magnitude, it shows that you don't understand the difference between these two concepts. The two words sound the same, but they mean something completely different. The other thing that's really, really interesting is Hunt's background, Jeremy Hunt. He went to, his family are landed gentry. His dad was an admiral in the Royal Navy. He went to Charterhouse. He was head boy there. He then went on to Oxford. And this is where it gets really funny. He studied PPE, which stands for politics, philosophy. And guess what the E stands for? Economics. Now, I'm not joking. I taught economics for 35 years. If you had a student who, by the end of the course, the A-level course, not talking undergraduate level, A-level economics, who misunderstood the difference between production and productivity, they were looking, best case scenario, at a grade E pass. You know, they were one of two things, thick and or lazy. And Jeremy Hunt obviously falls into that category. So this is another issue as well, isn't it? Is that it's the British class system. How the hell did this guy become head boy at Charterhouse? How did this person get into Oxford University? And how has he become Chancellor of the Exchequer? I think the answer is it's in his blood, it's in his breeding, it's the British class system. And the problem, see, Finland again is very different. Here it's a meritocracy. There's no private schools, big public schools. So if the bright people get into the best jobs, and that's really important for any society because you need competent people in important positions of power. For me personally, I would always opt to have a system that's decentralized. You know, I believe that aggregated knowledge is always going to be concentrated power. There's more knowledge aggregated in millions of individuals than there would be in the brains of somebody like. The third thing that I would say about this is Hunt's World Economic Forum. So if they've got nincompoops like Jeremy Hunt, they haven't got a chance of pulling off their Great Reset, because they're just not going to have the intellectual capabilities needed to do it. They've just got a bunch of inbred dummies trying to pull off this stunt. And you can see this, you know, this is, they were too cavalier. They rushed it all. All they've done, they wanted the Great Reset. They've just created the Great Awakening. So that's the third thing that I would say about this, is that hubris. You know, they think that they're masters of the universe, but they think that they're something like out of an Ayn Rand novel. But no, they've achieved their positions of power not through their own brain, but through bloodlines. The fourth thing that I find very, very interesting about this is that I would have thought Jeremy Hunt would have had a team of people working with him. You know, maybe, well, I would have thought you would have had somebody checking your speech before you gave it. Now, the interesting thing here is that, I don't know, maybe, even if you were up all night on the source, you still, and you've done a degree in PPE, you shouldn't be making an error like this. So, for Hunt to have done this, his advisors should be picking up on it. So why hasn't that happened? Why hasn't his advisors have gone like, hey, Jeremy, right, you can't say this because you're confusing production with productivity. Now, I think I know why no one pulled him up on it, because I've also seen this in organisations, you know, particularly ones that have been headed up by ruthless autocrats, and that is fear. So his advisors have thought, well, we can't tell him it's wrong, because we're toast. He's gonna throw the computer at us. We're going to be out on our ears. So this is another thing that's a problem with sort of top-down power structures run by incompetent people, is that even the competent people that they might employ below them, they're too scared to speak up and say, look, mate, you've made a mistake here. You need to change this. So the fact that Hunt said these words and his advisors didn't pick up on it tells me everything that I need to know about the relationship, or how Hunt manages his staff who are advising him. So that's all I'll say about this. And again, I think it's quite humorous, and there's more than a dollop of good news in this, is that these people are idiots. So with that, God bless.